Mario Andretti once told you, you can't win a race on the first lap, but you can lose it. The start of a race is a critical moment. All the cars are closer together than they'll be at any other point in the race. Cold tires, full tank, everyone looking for space, everyone wanting to get ahead. It's a moment full of uncertainty. Everyone thinks they're the one. It might have rained and nobody has driven in the wet yet that whole weekend. In short, there are a lot of question marks, endless variables. Senna even said, commenting after his win at Donington in '93, that it's a very particular moment and that ever since the junior categories, doing well on the first lap could pay off big time. Spoiler, that first lap you're thinking of is going to be on this list. And that's what we're going to talk about today on Splash and Go. 6 great opening laps in Formula One history, and you're going to be surprised by the final result. Let's go! Keep going. The idea for this video came from a conversation I had with one of you, a follower, Diogo Machado, whom I met at the launch of Reginaldo Lami's yearbook last week, at the time this video was recorded. I don't know when it's going to be released, and he came up to me in a way that made me think, here we go, Ādmir, do you know what was the best first lap in history? And I thought, he's going to try to catch me out. And I said, Barrichello's, in '93, Donington. Nah. And then he told me, and I'm not going to give any spoilers for this list. So let's go from the bottom up, from 6th to 1st, and the 6th. The 2016 season was yet another chapter in that ordeal where Fernando Alonso, with Honda engines in the McLaren, was constantly struggling just to finish races. Honda had been announced as McLaren's partner with great fanfare, aiming to revive the glory days from the 80s during the partnership that lasted from '88 to '92, when they won everything except the Drivers' and Constructors' Championships in '92. They took the Drivers' titles with Senna in '88, '90, and '91, with Prost in '89, but lost in '92. They won the Constructors' titles in '88, '89, '90, and '91. Ron Dennis had been warned by Mercedes, back in 2012, that he would lose their engine supply. And this was an argument used by Niki Lauda, to bring Hamilton to the team of the three-point star manufacturer. Ron Dennis, always very shrewd in business, started looking for another manufacturer to help pay the bills and, of course, supply engines. And with Honda, he found a partner willing not only to provide engines for free, but also to bring in some money. The problem was that the other engine suppliers in Formula One at that time, Ferrari, Mercedes, and Renault, had already been working on these new engines since 2011. And Honda started more or less 2 years behind. So, they entered Formula One in 2015 with a smaller, more compact, and overly optimistic engine concept. Everything went wrong. So it became normal in 2015, 2016, and it would continue through 2017 to see the McLaren cars breaking down along the way, sometimes even on the formation lap, racking up 50, 60, even 100% grid position penalties. Everyone would say, at this rate, Alonso will be starting from outside the city, and so on. And it was no different at the 2016 Malaysian Grand Prix. At 35 years old, Alonso was at the peak of his physical and mental form, even though he had suffered a mysterious shock back at the start of 2015, which I talk about in the Conspiracies video in the history of Formula One. The problem was that in 2015, with the Honda engine breaking down too much, the Japanese reduced the rev limit, lowered the power output, to see if that way they could at least start finishing races. Because of this, on so-called power-sensitive tracks, that is, tracks with long straights and high-speed corners, where the engine running at its limit makes all the difference, McLaren inevitably performed very poorly. And at the 2016 Malaysian Grand Prix, the Spaniards started from the back. Starting from 22nd and last place, Alonso shared the 11th row with Pascal Wehrlein's. It was hot, 32 degrees, and the air humidity was through the roof. And when the lights went out, the typical chaos of a first lap broke out. By that point, with 15 full seasons in Formula One under his belt, Alonso put his experience to good use and climbed from 22nd to 12th place, gaining 10 positions. It's true, he he benefited from two retirements, Sebastian Vettel and Nico Rosberg. Putting his performance into perspective, that is, if you take into account the car Alonso was driving, it all becomes even more impressive. And things wouldn't stop there, because Alonso managed to hold onto that position and keep making progress in the race, crossing the finish line in 7th place, scoring an excellent 6 points for McLaren Honda and finishing ahead of his teammate, Jenson Button, who had started much further up the grid, since Button started in 9th. In the 1995 Belgian Grand Prix, the two drivers fighting for the championship, Michael Schumacher from Benetton Renault and Damon Hill from Williams Renault, started from the back due to a qualifying session on Saturday that was both dry and wet, which caught them off guard. This put the two Ferraris, Berger and Alesi, on the front row, and on the second row, Mika Häkkinen and Johnny Herbert, who was Schumacher's teammate in the other Benetton. Hill was in 8th, Schumacher 16th. But then in the race, Schumacher delivered one of his masterclasses, true lessons in racing. Starting from 16th, he crossed from the first to the second lap already in 10th place. And he wasn't going to stop there. By lap 16 out of 45, a third of the race at Spa, he had already taken the lead, which he would only lose during a pit stop, but he would go on to win the race. One of those classic Schumacher lessons, overtaking several cars in different situations, using even brute force when necessary. And while it's true that he had the best car on the grid that year, a Benetton Renault set up to his liking, it's also true that his teammate, with the other car, who started much further ahead in 4th position and even led the race, would cross the finish line in 7th place, with Damon Hill, Martin Brundle, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, Mark Blundell, and Rubens Barrichello all finishing between the two of them. In the end, Schumacher finished the race in 1 hour and 34 minutes, crossing the finish line 19 seconds ahead of Damon Hill, who had started 8 places ahead of him on the grid. Can you believe it? Let's admit it, the 2020 Formula 1 season was unique. The first race only took place in June, delayed by the pandemic. And because of COVID-19, there were even doubts about how many Grands Prix would take place and where, because several countries couldn't host, and Formula 1 had to pull a last-minute calendar out of a hat, very different from the original. Just to remind you, we had the first race at the Red Bull Ring, the Austrian Grand Prix, on July 5th. A week later, on the same track, the Styrian Grand Prix. From there, Formula 1 went to Hungary, raced twice at Silverstone, the British Grand Prix and the Formula 1 70th Anniversary Grand Prix, then Barcelona, Spa-Francorchamps, Monza, the Tuscan Grand Prix at Mugello, the Russian Grand Prix at Sochi, the Eiffel Grand Prix at Nürburgring, and then arrived in Spain for the Portuguese Grand Prix at Portimao. Since 1996, at Estoril, when Jacques Villeneuve won, Tenerife, Lima, Pernambuco Standing, Northern Guyana had not hosted Formula 1, which would now return under these extraordinary circumstances. And it was in that race, in 2020, that Kimi Räikkönen, driving an Alfa Romeo, would have an absolutely incredible first lap. The Finnish Iceman was, at that point, 40 years old. And while it's true that he was no longer at his peak, very different from the driver who dazzled Formula 1 back in the early 2000s and made Ron Dennis steal him from Sauber, I've already told that story in this video here. It's also true that Kimi Matthias hadn't forgotten how to drive. Räikkönen had qualified his Alfa Romeo in 16th place, the best of those eliminated in Q1, ahead of his teammate Antonio Giovinazzi, both Haas cars of Roman Grosjean and Kevin Magnussen, and Nicholas Latifi's Williams. The first lap of the race was chaotic. Part of the grid started on medium tires. Others, like Räikkönen, went out on softs. And it worked out really well for him. He starts from 16th, actually loses a position to Giovinazzi on the starting straight, dropping to 17th. Then, he begins a climb worthy of playing a video game on easy mode. He basically overtakes everyone. He crosses the line in 7th place and, before the braking for turn 1, already on the second lap, he takes another position and would be 6th. In the race, unfortunately, he would drop back and finish in 11th place, the first spot outside the points. But his onboard footage, we'll just show little bits of it here in stop motion, is enough to make you cry. A bizarre display of car control in that very particular moment of cold tires, a heavy car, and everyone trying to find the ideal braking point, grip, and the right spot to hit the throttle. And he did it masterfully. You might find it strange that Ayrton Senna's magical first lap, remembered by many as the greatest or best opening lap in Formula One history, is ranked here in this list. But we're going to set the record straight here. The one I remembered as the greatest is coming up next. And then, Diego Machado, who suggested this video to us, opened my eyes to yet another one. No one here is a hater of Ayrton Senna, but it's our job to avoid the obvious. Trust us. The 1993 season saw Ayrton Senna at his technical and driving peak. Senna had never driven better, and he got the absolute most out of the MP4-8. And a lot of people believe, and I do too, that if he'd had an engine with 50 or 60 more horsepower, he would have given Alain Prost a much harder time in that magnificent Williams FW15C. McLaren, and here's some context, had done a tremendous job from 92 to 93 to catch up, with the support of Tag and Mansour using Vanguard technology to bridge the gap, the technological chasm that had opened up from the end of 92 to the start of 93. Because in 92, Williams showed up with the FW14B featuring active suspension, while McLaren introduced the MP4-7 at the start of that year, debuting here at Interlagos, still with springs and dampers. And there was nothing they could do. The 1992 season was a massacre, and Senna very accurately described the Williams as a car from another planet. For 93, the story would be different. Ron Dennis and company would pour money into that car, which would then come with all the gadgets: active suspension, programmable and semi-automatic gearbox, traction control, and ABS brakes. But caught off guard by Honda's departure, announced in mid-92, they had to make do with Ford Cosworth engines. And then the difference in terms of power, brute force, and straight-line speed became huge. But the MP4-8 performed really well on tracks that demanded a good chassis, aerodynamics, and where engine power didn't matter as much. And in the wet, things would even out. Especially because the V8 had much better drivability than the V10. Drivability. What exactly are you talking about? The V10 engine is bigger, has more parts, more cylinders, and because of that, it has much greater inertia. That's why it delivers power more abruptly. And in the wet, when downshifting, it destabilizes the rear end more every time you drop a gear. With the V8, all of that is smoother. And this equipment, in the hands of a driver who became famous, possibly for being the greatest in history in the wet, maybe only Max Verstappen drives like Senna in the rain, the world would witness it on Easter Sunday.
I still remember that after the race was over, we went looking for chocolates around the house. One of the greatest performances in the history of a Formula One driver.
Not just the first lap, but the whole race. Senna started in 4th, dropped to 5th, momentarily overtaken by Schumacher. He regained 4th place and then went downhill after 𝘾𝙤𝙥𝙮𝙧𝙞𝙤𝙀. He would still go on to overtake Damon Hill, and at the hairpin, before finishing the first lap, Alain Prost in the Williams. From that point on, he pulled away, disappeared at the front, and won in epic fashion. And his first lap would be immortalized on the internet, in motivational videos, and in people's memories as the greatest in Formula One history. But it appears in 3rd place because on that very same day, Rubens Goncalves Barrichello had arrived in Formula One in 1993 as a young prospect coming from Formula 3000. Eddie Jordan gave the Brazilian his first chance, and that day, Barrichello, who had already performed well in South Africa and Brazil, would show what he was made of. It was the 3rd round of the championship, and by that point, Jordan had already switched Rubens' teammate, who started the year with Ivan Capelli, because Eddie Jordan thought, I need to put an experienced guy next to this rookie. Capelli was experienced, but he did very poorly in the first 2 races, so he was dropped. Thierry Boutsen took over the car alongside Rubens. Rubens qualified the car in 12th position. Boutsen 19th. But Rubens, unnoticed by the cameras while Senna was putting on a show at the front, climbed from 12th to 4th at the finish line. 8 positions gained, compared to 4 by Ayrton Senna. And this would have been the greatest lap in Formula One history, in my mind, until our friend, a channel follower, opened my eyes to an even greater show. If you look at the 1962 Formula One season and compare it to what happens today, it feels like we're talking about another planet, another dimension. The championship had 9 rounds, starting on May 20th and ending on December 29th. Graham Hill, driving for BRM, and Jim Clark, for Lotus, were fighting for the title. Hill, at 33 years old, was the experienced veteran. Clark, considered by some to be the fastest driver ever to sit in a Formula One car, was the young prodigy at 26. He was in his second full year of Formula One and, up until then, hadn't won anything. Just to clarify, he had already won 2 races in '62, but what I mean is, he hadn't won any championships and wouldn't win one in that year of '62 either. But what he did at Nürburgring puts him in first place. The race took place on the legendary Nordschleife layout, North Loop in German, with more than 21 kilometers and hundreds of corners, right in the middle of the forest, with no barriers, no gravel traps, no protection, no rescue, no safety car, nothing. Just courage and God at the wheel. It's no wonder the circuit had, and still has to this day, the nickname Green Hell. It was August 5th, and every day of activity up to that point had already featured dramatic weather conditions. That even rhymed. After a storm, at noon the race was delayed by an hour to see if conditions would improve. And there you are, thinking Formula One is whiny in 2025 when, for safety, they don't let them race. In qualifying, on Saturday, Clark had put his Lotus Climax in 3rd position, behind Graham Hill with his BRM and Dan Gurney with the Porsche. The pole position lap time, 8 minutes and 47 seconds. But then, at the start, Clark forgot to activate the fuel pump. The car just sat there. He lost 13 seconds before figuring out what was happening and dropped to 26th place. We have footage, and I'm going to ask the editor to circle Clark's car for you, sitting still while everyone else takes off. Keep in mind that back in the 60s, TV coverage was a joke compared to today, and there weren't cameras all around the track to follow what Clark would do on that first lap, because he would overtake, listen to this, 17 cars on the very first lap. Granted, it was a much longer first lap than usual, 21 kilometers, so about 5 laps on a regular track. But on the other hand, it wasn't just any track. It was the Green Hell, and it was wet, right in the middle of the pack, in the chaos, overtaking from 26th, which was practically the last position. Actually, let me check, I'll tell you right now. There were 29 cars on the grid. 3rd to last position on the grid, fine, and yet he crossed the finish line at the end of the first lap already in 10th place. He would end up in 4th place. The race at Nürburgring was 15 laps long. That race was won by Graham Hill, who would go on to take the championship that year. But you have to agree with me, that was a masterclass from a driver who, until Ayrton Senna came along, was considered the pinnacle of daring and speed. Did you remember all these opening laps? Did you know this story about Jim Clark? I didn't remember it. It was our follower Diego who told me about it. A shout out to him. Do you remember any others that I forgot? It's quite likely. There are a lot of great opening laps, but I picked 6 so it wouldn't get too long. So that was another episode of Splash N Go on YouTube. I hope you all enjoyed it. Leave a like, it's free. Doesn't cost a thing. You know that. And it really helps the channel. Do me this favor, do us this favor. Comment down below if you prefer other opening laps, or if you would rank them in a different order. I suspect so, and even if you don't agree with my criteria, it's still a criterion. If you don't want to comment, just leave an emoji. Send regards to your spouse, partner, cat, dog, parakeet. Send them to me. Send them to my cat. Anything you write in the comment box helps the algorithm see it as engagement and keeps spreading our content all over the internet, alright? So you don't miss out on anything we do here. We have notification channels, Instagram, Telegram, and WhatsApp where you can join. Link down below in the description, and you'll get an automatic message every time I publish new content. We have about 2,000 people in each of these groups getting automatic notifications, breaking news, and the race schedules on Formula One weekends. It's super convenient, and that way we don't have to rely on the algorithm to remember to remind you. Last but not least, our social media channels are still going strong and keep on growing. Instagram, Twitter, Threads, and TikTok, where there's content all the time, the handles are showing up here, and you already know the link is down below in the description. So that's it. Big hug to you all. Shout out to our follower Diego, who suggested this excellent topic for the video. I did the research, and here it is. Thanks, and another big hug.